Glad you could join me as we explore another classic film. While this was not a commercial success at the time of its release, it has subsequently been recognised amongst the greatest films of all time. Certainly one of the best silent films ever made. It is also a film we are lucky to still have. Notwithstanding how many silent films we have now lost, this was a film that was ordered destroyed following a court action that was brought against it for copyright infringement. It is from a director who at the time of its release was a relative unknown, but who has subsequently been recognised as a genius who had a significant influence on the development of world cinema. And while this film predates the establishment of the horror genre, it is also one of the creepiest horror films ever made. It is Nosferatu from 1922. The film's director F.W. Murnau was greatly influenced by Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, Shakespeare and Ibsen, through his friendship with stage director Max Schreck. Reinhardt had been impressed by Murnau and admitted him to his theatrical school where he learned both acting and directing. During World War I, Murnau served in the German Air Force, surviving several crashes before a forced landing in Switzerland led to his internment, though he was soon able to work in the theatre in Lucerne. After the war he began working in film and came into his own with a string of highly regarded films, which included Satanas and Der Januskopf from 1920 and Schloss Vogelöd from 1921. Only a brief fragment of Satanas survives and Der Januskopf is entirely lost, with only Schloss Vogelöd surviving in its entirety. In early 1922, Murnau made Maritza, a film now mostly lost, and followed it up with Nosferatu. The studio behind Nosferatu, Prana Films, was founded in 1921 by Enrico Diekmann and occult artist Albin Grau. Their intention was to produce occult and supernatural themed films, but this was their only production as they declared bankruptcy shortly after Nosferatu's release. Henrik Galeen was attached to write a screenplay inspired by the Dracula novel, despite Prana Films not having obtained the film rights. To avoid copyright infringement, Galeen moved the story from 1890s Britain to the fictional North German harbour town of Wisborg in 1838. He changed the characters' names and added the idea of the vampire bringing the plague to Wisborg via the rats on his ship. He left out the vampire hunting character Van Helsing and renamed his vampire Count Orlok, who simply killed his victims rather than turning them into vampires. This is the first film to require the vampire to sleep by day, as sunlight would kill him with the original Dracula only being weakened by sunlight. Some academics have suggested that the film contains themes of xenophobia and anti-Semitism, most notably through the way Orlok is portrayed. A rat-like appearance, with his hooked nose, long claw-like fingernails and large bald head, along with his interest in buying up German property, were consistent with caricatures of the time. This argument is undermined by the fact that Murnau was friendly with and protective of a number of Jewish men and women throughout his life. Also, being a homosexual, Murnau would have been reluctant to persecute any subgroup within German society. Perceived associations between Orlok and the anti-Semitic stereotypes are unlikely to have been the result of conscious decisions by Murnau. Murnau's films are known for their innovative use of light and shadow to create mood, a visual style of storytelling, limited use of intertitles, and the frequent use of arches, doorways and gates to frame characters, all styles which are evident in this film. Filming began in July of 1921 and ran through to October, shooting exteriors in the northeastern German towns of Wismar, Lübeck, Nuremberg, Rostock, and on the island of Sylt. The exteriors for scenes set in Transylvania were shot in northern Slovakia, including the Orava and the Starihard castles. Interiors were shot at the Joffa studio in Berlin, with additional exteriors shot in the nearby Tegele forest. Murnau mostly followed Galeen's screenplay and its handwritten instructions on camera positioning and lighting, but rewrote a number of important scenes, most notably the last scene of the film, in which Ellen sacrifices herself and the vampire dies in the first rays of the sun. While some form of storyboarding had been around since the time of George Méliès, Murnau prepared detailed sketches for each scene and used a metronome to control the pace of the acting. Nosferatu was one of the first films to feature an original score written by Hans Erdmann. An orchestra played this music at the film's Berlin premiere, however most of the original score has been lost. Over time, many composers and musicians have written or improvised their own soundtracks to accompany the film. A reconstruction of Erdmann's original score was released in 1995. Following the film's release, Bram Stoker's widow sued the producers for unauthorised use of the novel, and an English court ordered all copies and negatives of the film to be destroyed. While the original negatives were destroyed, the film would resurface through second-generation reels from other countries. Although Murnau is renowned for using very few intertitles, the titles on salvage prints had their meaning changed subtly through their translation into French, then English, and then back to German again. This resulted in different names for the main characters in different English versions. In a few, Hutter is called Thomas or Jonathan, and Hutter's wife is variably referred to as Ellen and Mina. The original intertitles were discovered in the 1970s on an old print housed in an East German film archive and appear on modern versions of the film. Nosferatu was acclaimed at the time of its release by surrealist artists and writers, but initially had a mixed critical reception. It is considered one of the most frightening films of all time, due largely to the performance of Max Schreck as Orlok. His portrayal was so terrifyingly real that rumours that he was actually a real vampire began almost immediately. The 2000 film Shadow of the Vampire is a fictionalised depiction of the events surrounding the film's production and rumours of Max Schreck's vampire status. Werner Herzog feels this is the greatest German film ever made, and he directed the remake Nosferatu the Vampire in 1979. Roger Ebert added Nosferatu to his list of the great movies, writing that he admired the film more for its artistry and ideas, its atmosphere and images, than for its ability to manipulate the emotions. It avoids tricks like sudden threats that pop in from the side of the screen, but Nosferatu remains effective. It doesn't scare us, but it haunts us. The movie was banned in Sweden due to excessive horror until 1972. It is included in the 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die. It was ranked 21st in Empire Magazine's 100 Best Films of World Cinema, and was selected by the Vatican in the art category of its list of 45 great films. So even if you don't base your film choices on the Pope's recommendations, there are lots of great reasons to watch this particular film. Despite being 100 years old, it is still one of the creepiest films of all time. There is something special about all of F.W. Murnau's surviving films, and this is no exception. It's a refreshing take on the vampire story, and despite the low-tech costuming and special effects, these are still features which look quite impressive on screen. So, what I'd suggest you do is that you go to our website, find our virtual screening page, find the link to this particular film, click on it and watch it, and as always, we'd always love you to come back, let others know what you thought about this particular film, and whether you recommend it for them also. And then we'll be back in the not too distant future for our next classic films review. Catch you next time.